What happened with the Doctor Strange movie you were rumored to be attached to a script for? And how did you get involved, and why did it never get to work its magic?
I had an agent by the name of, I switched agents by the name of Don Kopoloff, and
Mhm.
he introduced me to Stan Lee. And Stan Lee was an idol of mine growing up. I absolutely loved Marvel comics. I loved them much more than the DC comics,
Mhm.
obviously. And because they had more heart, the characters were
Yeah.
imperfect, they vulnerable, more like human beings. Anyway, I became very good friends with Stan. We hit it off so well, and I worked with him for around 3 years on around three different Marvel projects. I was the first one to tackle Doctor Strange. And the way I would work with Stan is, he would tell me what his thoughts were, and he's an amazing guy. I absolutely adored him. We were like really good friends for around 20 years, and then he started getting older, and he had some
Mhm.
tough times. But absolute genius,
Yeah.
nicest guy in the world, most generous guy in the world. And I would work with him, and we would, and so on Doctor Strange, I poured through all the comic books that they ever did on Doctor Strange,
Oh.
and I was the one who came up with the idea that we're gonna in the opening first movie we're gonna have a Doctor Strange versus Dormammu, who
Ooh,
is
cool.
one of many villains.
Yeah.
And no, and I had this thing. It's called the Five Fingers of Dormammu, where I had Stonehenge involved in it, and he was
Mhm.
going to come down and open up into our world, and evil was going to pour into the world. He was going to destroy the world. So I worked on that. I came up with a very detailed treatment on it, and then the producer who I was working with. It's a terrible story. What happened? I mean, I don't know if you really want to hear this, but
It's okay.
this is Hollywood, okay?
Yeah.
So I'm invited every year to Stan's New Year's party,
Mhm.
and he has up on the hill overlooking Sunset Boulevard, and Elvira is there,
Oh,
and
cool.
Lou Ferrigno is there,
Oh,
all and,
awesome.
and all the Marvel. This is going back
Yeah.
many years. So I have so the producer who hired me with Stan to do Doctor Strange, I had pitched them the story, and I wrote my treatment and everything for it. It's a very detailed treatment. And I'm at the party, and I'm schmoozing with the producer,
Mhm.
and I'm telling him about this new project that I have that I'm doing for Eddie Murphy Productions.
Yeah.
And this is what you do. You schmooze and you pitch and you
Mhm.
try to get people. Okay. So I'm telling him this story, and I'm getting like, I'm like 90% through with the story, and there's a 10% left. I'm getting ready to do the punchline, how it ends. And this young, very attractive, like young girl comes over, and she goes, "Hi, hello." And I say, "Hi, how are you? Let me just have like 2 minutes to just finish what I'm doing here." And all of a sudden, she says, "Do you know who I am?" I go, "No." She goes, "I'm Stanley's daughter, you SOB.
Ooh.
You were very rude
Ooh.
to me. You were very
Ooh.
rude to me." I go, "Listen, I love your dad. I'm so sorry. I certainly didn't mean this." And the producer is like, he's like flushed, like he doesn't know what to say. It's
Oh.
horrific.
Oh, no.
So I said, "Listen, let me just." So she storms out. So I go,
Oh.
"Forget the story." I go over to Stan. And I say to Stan, "Stan, this terrible thing happened. I feel so bad. I'm not going to start crying." I said, "Someone comes over to me. I'm in the middle of pitching this story to
Mhm.
somebody." And I said, "Could you just give me another minute, And she tells me, "It's your daughter." And that's it. I don't, please, Stan.
Yeah.
She goes, "Don't worry about it, Larry. I love you. I love you. He's young. Don't worry about it. Everything's fine. Everything's fine." And it was fine, except
Oh.
except the producer. I go to do the next pitch meeting with the
Uh-huh.
producer, and he doesn't want anything to do with me. I,
Oh,
I
man.
couldn't, and to this day, I believe that that's the reason why. That was an
That's
example of
so
you're at a party,
lame.
you're having such a good time, and all of a sudden something happens and the rug is pulled out from underneath you.
Yeah.
But okay, so when the movie finally came out, Doctor Strange, and that was just like 2 years ago or something.
Mhm.
Uh, I'm When you're a member of the Writers Guild, which I'm a lifetime member of the Writers Guild, you realize there's going to be when they finish a film, they send out a letter to all the now the email to all the people who ever wrote on Doctor Strange,
Oh.
and they say, do you think you deserve a credit? And usually writers say, yes, I deserve a credit, and they do a thing called an arbitration. They get a bunch of writers who form a panel, and they have a terrible, laborious job of reading all the screenplays, and then they make a decision of who actually made substantive changes in the screenplay. And this does not include dialogue, by the way. You can rewrite every word of dialogue, doesn't count. It has to do with story. It has to do with there's a certain criteria that they use. So I'm like all excited because, all of a sudden I get a phone call. I get a phone call from the Writers Guild saying, I've been trying to get in touch with you. There was a terrible mishap that happened. We left out 3 or 4 writers who originally worked on the early stages of Doctor Strange, and you're one of the writers. They go, oh my gosh, it's another one of these miracles. It's going to be so great. Because I look at them, I see the movie. The movie's already out. And they left out Bob Gale, the famous Bob Gale. Oh, and a whole bunch, and one other writer, I think. And do you want to go for the arbitration? Yes, I want to go for the arbitration. And I spent probably, it dragged out to a month because there was too much material to go over, trying to make the case that I selected the villain that they used in the movie. You could have selected any other number of villains. There was 1,000 villains in the Marvel catalog. And I gave him a very specific thing. We had these large glowing eyes, and he's going to come down, and I deserve a shared story credit. That's it. This went on for a month. It turned out, didn't get it, finished, didn't have it, and that was the end of it. Almost killed me, but that's the way it goes. But
hey, you gave it a shot,
But it's interesting that the guy who actually did get the credit for it, did the sole credit for the screenplay, he actually references the fact that Bob Gale, Lawrence Block, and one other person, did the earlier drafts. So at least I got a little publicity out.
Yeah, a little bit of that. So, I mean, that's better than nothing. Speaking of Doctor Strange, did you see the 70s TV movie with Peter Hooton?
No.
That's a vintage slice of cheese right there. That really is.
Is it good or is it terrible?
I didn't think it was that good, but if you're curious about it, give it a watch sometime. It's definitely dated for sure.
Right.
Like a lot of those 70s Marvel movies were.
But there were 20 writers who worked on Doctor Strange until they finally got. By the way, Doctor Strange never could have gotten made until the special effects.
Yeah.
With it, that's the same thing about.
You could tell in the 70s TV movie, like
even all the stuff that I did with Marvel never got it right until again, Sam Raimi did Spider-Man, and the effects caught up with it, and that made it.
Yeah,
that just basically made the Marvel name again.
Because people think about like Marvel now, it's like this big juggernaut, the MCU, like, and back in the day, it was TV, it was Incredible Hulk with Bill Bixby. It was, the Amazing Spider-Man show with Nicholas Hammond, which I actually don't, in cartoons.
Yeah.
And that was their big thing, and they tried to make Captain America a new show with Red Brown. It didn't work the first time, but they were like, no, it's gonna work the second time. We're gonna do it again, and we're gonna have Christopher Lee, and it still didn't work. And until Spider-Man, you had stuff like they were doing things like, oh, here's Bill Bixby, and he's back for the TV movie of the week, as the Hulk. And then Howard the Duck was their first big film adaptation, for theaters, was Howard the Duck.
Did you know, by the way, that Miles Chapin was Harold the Duck?
Oh, huh.
Miles Chapin, who stars in the Funhouse, was in, yes.
Oh, I did. Yeah, I like, I actually don't mind Howard the Duck, as I grew up watching that on VHS along with Captain America. But, then you have Dolph Lundgren's Punisher. They didn't even get a theatrical release. And, David Hasselhoff as Nick Fury, Agent of S.H.I.E.L.D.
It was hard. I did Captain America, and I wound up with the credit after an arbitration on it. And the way that came about was so much fun. We had beepers in those days. We didn't have cell phones. We had beepers, and then somebody beeped you. So I'm a freelance writer. I have to have a beeper. So I'm walking my son, who's like around, I don't know, he's like 6 years old at the time, 5 years old, around the block. My beeper goes off. So I run home to my wife. What is it? She goes, Stan Lee just called. Quick, call him back. So I call Stan. He says,
Mm-hmm.
Larry, you know what? I have something that you might really be really good for. You have to meet me right now at the Beverly Hills Hotel, on Sunset Boulevard. And I want you to meet Michael Winner. Michael Winner is the guy who directed Death Wish,
Yeah.
and it it's an amazing movie.
Mm-hmm.
And so I need you to meet with him right now. So could you please come over here right now? So I get dressed really quickly and I run over to Beverly Hills Hotel. I meet with Stan Lee, and I'm honored to meet with Michael Winner.
Mm-hmm.
And we start talking about the script for Captain America. And they had played it like totally off base. It was like funny, not very
Huh.
little action in it. I actually, there are some clips that I'll get to you, where they actually announced that Marlon Brando was going to be in it, and they were going to actually have Elton John in it. Believe it or not, it's announced. This is
Yeah.
announced. And there's things in Variety and in the report that
Yeah.
say Stan Lee, Lawrence Block, because I
Mm-hmm.
got involved in it, and Michael Winner do this.
Mm-hmm.
So they decided that the script was just awful, that Michael
Was
Winner
this
had
with
done it.
Canon?
Yes.
No.
And so they wanted me to do a complete restart and rethink of everything, rethink a story for Captain America. And I did it. I was very proud of the fact that I came up with the missile launch, and where he's tied
Mm-hmm.
up to the rocket that's going to hit the White House, and then he's frozen,
Yeah.
and that the villain in this has been responsible for all the assassinations that have ever happened in history, including JFK, Robert Kennedy,
Yeah.
and Martin Luther King. And now he's decided that he's an old man now, and Captain America's young because he was frozen alive for
Mm-hmm.
that amount of time before he's thawed out. And the new thing was they're going to stop assassinating leaders. They're just going to kidnap a leader, inject him with a little implant, and be able to
Yeah.
control his mind, and then be able to start World War III or whatever they want to do.
Yeah, I
So
think
I
that's a good idea. I think, when it comes to the story for the 1990 film, it's not really that bad of a story. I think where it gets wonky and where it's, gets kind of bad is when you have other things like, stuff like Captain Carjacker, like, oh, I'm feeling sick. I'm going to steal a car,
Oh, it's
you
just
know.
terrible. That's not my done.
I know.
No, I finished my script. It eventually went. It became 21st Century Films,
Hmm.
and I did my script, and they gave me notes. I did some rewrites on, and they brought another writer in, and he came up with a couple of other things in this, and then it went to an arbitration. Again, that damn arbitration that you go through. Only this time I had very good ammo because I had come up
Yeah.
with the major plot with the president, doing this. And I had also come up, I was so proud of the one scene I was most proud of
Mhm.
is when he's about to launch him, and Captain America, Steve Rogers, basically says to the Skull, come here, I need to tell you something.
Yeah.
He goes, what? No time to talk. He goes, I really need to tell you something. And he bends over and he says, two can fly cheaper than one. And he
Yeah.
grabs his hand like he's not gonna let him go. He's gonna take him with him when
Hmm.
the rocket launches. And in the squabble that happens, the Skull accidentally cuts his own arm off, his hand off, and then for the rest of the movie, and that's one of the reasons why he hates Captain America is
Yeah.
he doesn't have a hand.
Yeah.
That was
Yeah,
another thing.
I like that part too. Like, so it was meant to be an accident, not intentional. Because like in the movie, it's like intentionally. It looks like he intentionally cuts off his hand.
He cuts off his own hand because it's the only
Yeah,
reason how he
yeah,
cannot wind up going. It's like you're pinned under a car.
yeah.
You have to do it. So yeah,
Like 127 hours, but this time with the Red
yes,
Skull.
yes, with the Red.
um, it wasn't your idea to make him like Italian, was it, or to have the whole wearing makeup and he's not the Red Skull. He's just some guy with
No,
scars on his
no,
face.
no, no, no.
Yeah,
It's a lot of the stuff was added on. There was a lot of fluff, a lot of psychology that was added on to it,
a lot
and a
of
lot of
preachy
backstory. Yeah,
environmental.
yes, yes, yeah. No, none of that. Just the basic core story, and it was very nice to win to win the arbitration and share a story credit.
Yeah. So speaking of Captain America, what were the challenges like you faced writing your script, of your version of the movie? Probably dealing with canon. It's probably one of those
No, I
challenges.
was one on one with they usually
Yeah.
when I work with Stan, I did a lot of projects with Stan. I did original stuff with Stan also that had nothing to do with Marvel, which I still control the rights to. he was a joy. I mean, you would, he was just so good. When I did the Fantastic Four, I originally had a scene where Ben Grimm is so depressed because he's turned into this monster, you
Yeah.
know, that he's going to throw himself off a bridge, and that's when he meets the blind girl who's the love interest
Yeah.
in the story. And Stanley really stops me. He says, "I'm sorry, Ben Grimm is never going to contemplate throwing himself off a bridge. He'll do other things, but
Mhm.
we don't do suicide, attempted suicide." And I mean, this was Stan being very honest, and this was his
Yeah.
baby, his characters, and it was great. But he was very, very generous, and he used to also, whenever went to pitch meetings with him, I
Mhm.
introduced him to TNT. They had never met him before. We were going to do a
Oh.
movie with him over at TNT, but whenever I would pitch, it was so funny. He'd say, "Now Larry's going to tell you the story." I speak with my hands. And he
Mhm.
would stop in the middle of the pitch and he'd go, "Look what he does with his hands." He's like, he's orchestrating. He's like, go on, Larry, go on, go on. He would always do this. One last thing about going back to the Fantastic Four.
Yeah.
I was the first person to sell the Fantastic Four to anyone, and that was the CBS theatrical films. And what we did was we had 4 posters, like full-size posters, done
Mhm.
of the 4 characters of Fantastic Four, and then we had to have a villain. And Marvel would not allow us to use Doctor Doom. They wanted Doctor Doom for somebody else who maybe wanted to separate him and make a movie about Doctor Doom.
Hmm.
So Stan and I had to invent a new villain, and we jointly came up with a character called Gore Talak, who's from another planet, and he's got telekinesis and other powers that he can do. And he had New York make up do this amazing artwork. And one of the things he said to me, "I would like to have Jack Nicholson play him." This is years ago. So they made him look, and I have the artwork actually, and you can see it on my
Yeah.
Instagram account and my IMDb account. The thing is probably worth a fortune,
Mhm.
but you see this thing called Gore Talak, and we walked into CBS theatrical. Stan said, "Larry's going to tell you a story now,"
Mhm.
and we were pitching in front of the vice president of CBS. They were going to do features in those days, and I came away with a very sweet deal, and and a great souvenir of the poster boy,
Yeah.
which I got to keep. Yeah,
So, I mean, you had the idea of, Jack Nicholson playing a villain before, he
yeah.
went on to play the Joker. So, because like, did that happen like, but it happened before '89, right?
I just remember. Well, yeah, I think he wanted Jack Nicholson because Nicholson was probably the hottest actor for about
Yeah.
5 or 10 years,
Yeah.
and but there's a
Hmm.
resemblance, and it's a
Yeah.
great piece of artwork. Yeah.
So, you've seen Captain America, right?
Oh yeah, oh yeah, I've seen it. Yeah, yeah.
Is there
I
anything about that film that you liked, or and there's probably a lot that you didn't like about it, considering all the stuff that's added and thrown in there.
I just like my stuff. I
Yeah,
felt really bad. No, I watched the Blu-ray, the Blu-ray,
yeah, it
and
looks
it's
great.
terrible.
I mean,
But it's terrible to see Albert
yeah,
Pyun, the director,
yeah,
and Steve Tolkien, who
hmm,
shared story credit with me, got the screenplay credit.
I know.
It's horrible to hear them saying that we didn't have enough money to do anything.
Uh-huh.
And they're like fetching about it. It's a horrible thing to say.
Yeah.
I'm actually I'm starting to do a lot of Q&As now on
Hmm.
Funhouse and screenings, and
Yeah.
somebody wants me to do a Q&A on Captain America, and I said I would only do it if they let me like also do the shtick about the other Stan Lee projects that I worked on.
Yeah.
Where I would like to work with Stan Lee, and they've agreed to do that, so I think that'll be a lot of
Yeah, I
fun.
think that should be a lot of fun. It'll be more fun than the movie. But the movie is it's for me it's a campy B movie. It's a lot like I enjoy it in the same way that I do a lot of the other campy superhero films of the time because other than Batman '89, uh, superhero films were campy. It was pure camp. I mean, Superman the movie is a great movie, and I like Superman 2, and I even don't mind Superman 3, but they're campy superhero films. I mean, Swamp Thing was camp. Return of the Swamp Thing was even more camp. That was like
Yeah,
trauma levels of camp.
right.
So Captain America is kind of similar in that regard, but Matt Salinger is just not. He's just not a very good lead. Doesn't carry much of a presence, and I think he's a nice guy and everything. But I
It's
know
the
at
it's
one
the
point.
It's the
Yeah.
throw up. It's the throw up line that
Yeah,
he goes.
yeah.
I think I'm going to be sick. I'm telling you, Stan would say, "I'm sorry. Our characters, they don't commit suicide, and they don't, and then they don't throw up."
And they don't jack people's cars either.
That's right.
He's
Yeah,
supposed to
yeah,
be a superhero and he's
yeah, yeah,
carjacking people.
yeah,
But and there's, I mean, the suit looks good. I mean, for the time period. But you got the rubber ears, and the reason why
yeah,
is because they did the thing where you poke his ears through the mask, but like they were chafing. So
yeah.
they're just like, okay, rubber ears, and it's just so bad. But it's got a pretty good cast, and I like Scott Pauling as the
Yeah.
Red Skull. I think he does a good job. There's some lines of dialogue I do remember, like "You remain a pathetic symbol that nobody cares about.
Yeah.
I care." But I mean, the Winter Soldier and the First Avenger are just miles better in so many different ways. But I just have, I grew up with the film. I watched it on VHS quite a bit. I used to rent it from the rental store. So, I have a little bit of a soft spot for it, but I can't, I'm not going to defend it. I'm not going to be like, oh, it's some underrated movie. It's classic. No, not at all. I'll defend the Funhouse. I'm not coming to bat for Captain America. I'm not
Yeah,
gonna
so
put
I'm
the
not coming.
shield up for that
I'm
one.
not coming to bat for it either. I'd rather come to bat for the other two movies I was involved in. If you'll check me
Yeah.
out on IMDb, which is Sabrina the Teenage Witch
Yes.
and Redline,
Yeah, and
which is
that ties into one of the next things I was going to talk about, but I kind of want to talk about comic book films one more time in terms of what are your thoughts about how comic book films differ from back when you wrote Captain America or Fantastic Four or Doctor Strange to today. Like, did you see the genre becoming as big as it is today? Why or why not?
okay. I never imagined the power of the CGI, even though I love stop motion. I
Mhm.
love practical
I do
effects.
too.
I think the
Phil
practical
Tippett
effects.
is Phil
Oh,
Tippett is a master.
well, actually
Yeah,
Phil Tippett, but actually Ray
Ray
Harryhausen. So
Harryhausen too. Yeah,
yeah. And Willis O'Brien, who Ray Harryhausen actually worked for the original King Kong, believe it or not. Those are my. I love I love stop motion, and I love practicals. The practicals that like Stan Winston does,
yes,
in the
Rick
thing, and
Baker
this
and Bruce Wayless,
Greg Nicotero. These
Bob
guys are.
Bottin.
Yep. These I love this stuff. Uh, but the CGIs were necessary, which made the Marvel comics like come to life. And again, the first time that ever happened, I think, was in Spider-Man, where you could realize the potential of doing something that was just so extraordinary. But it's a whole different. It's almost like a difference between black and white and color.
Yeah,
It's a whole different thing, and I think what it is I loved the Ray Harryhausen movies, the Seven Voyages Sinbad, the
hmm
Golden Voyage of Sinbad. I actually worked with the guy who directed the Golden Voyage of Sinbad. He was very Gordon Hessler, really good
yeah,
guy who had done a couple of horror movies, really good horror movies also. I think he did Scream and Scream Again.
hmm
Uh, uh, but it's almost as if a bad in the old horror movies were like monster movies. They used to have like rubber suits, and it was just
yeah.
or they would use iguanas, and they would put like toothpicks on
Food
the
of the
horns.
gods. Where they had like the giant, superimposed
So
rats
so
and chickens and
yeah,
everything. Yeah,
it's almost as if that compared to really good stop motion animation, like in a Ray Harry, like in the Seven Voyages of Sinbad, is what the '80s early comic book movies were
yeah,
compared to once you use the good CGI.
yeah.
So it's like it's almost as if it takes a B movie and makes it into an A movie, the
Yeah.
CGI. And
I also think story, writing, a lot of the screenplays for these Marvel movies are really great stuff. They're not having Captain Carjacker or I feel like I'm going to be sick or any of that. So I think that definitely helps too. And tying into the Marvel discussion, have you seen the 1994 Fantastic Four? The unreleased, infamous Fantastic Four movie.
I know all
That
about. I
yeah.
actually I actually, it's I have an,
Hmm.
or I actually have a note that I kept,
Hmm.
which says, "Dear Larry, enclosed find the trailer for the Fantastic
Hmm.
Four, uh, and and a magazine which featured it. You know,
Yeah.
this is signed Oli Sassoon. Now,
Oh.
I know the real story because he told it to me. We became friends,
Uh-huh.
and the story is that Constantine Films had the rights to make the Fantastic Four. And there was a clause that basically said that if they didn't do it by, if they didn't make a movie by a certain date,
Hmm.
they would lose the rights. Now all of a sudden, Spider-Man comes out, and it's a whole new ballgame. And people now realize for the first time that these movies are worth a fortune. And and so they have a problem. The problem that Constantine Films has is they don't have a movie made. So they basically get someone, Oli Sassoon, who again I was good friends with him, and they tell him, you have to make this movie, and we have like $1 million to make the movie. We're going to do it Roger Corman style, and but we will do the most incredible special effects afterwards with CGI, and it's going to be great. So they convinced Oli that the movie that he was making was a real movie. They convinced the entire cast and the crew that it was a real
Wow.
movie, that it was going to get a release, and that it was going to be absolutely phenomenal, and that he was going to become the next Steven Spielberg, because this was going to be such a big hit. And so they did it, and they did it. I don't know how long they shot it in, maybe 6 weeks time or something like that. It was a budget of they threw away like $1 million on this movie, and they made it. And if you looked at I've seen the movie.
Hmm. I've
It's
seen
like,
it too.
well, you see how the elastic band.
Yes.
It's like a wooden puppet thing on a
Yeah.
thing that you pull back
And
and
then
forth.
the CG at the end is so bad.
Well, they promised that they would do a
Yeah.
little bit. Okay,
Uh-huh.
so the point
But
is
then it
is
gets
that
94, like CG back then, like because you were saying like Spider-Man, but I don't think Spider-Man had come out yet. I think maybe you're talking about like Batman was like a huge hit around that time.
something came out that made them want to throw
Yeah.
out $1 million
Hmm.
just so they could fulfill the obligation in the contract
Yeah.
and release some kind of a movie. And the
Hmm.
really sad thing about it is, again, is that as far as for that whatever time it took that they were making that movie, the
Yeah.
entire crew, the director, everybody involved in it thought this is the big one. This is going to be
Hmm.
amazing. This is going to be fantastic. And it was just done as an exercise so that
Yeah.
they could do the
I always
cause.
feel bad. I always feel bad for the people involved with that because they didn't know, that it was just going to be something they're doing on the cheap just to keep the rights. And
That's
you
what it
can
was.
kind of see that though in terms of like, I mean, not that specifically, but you can see the sincerity, in terms of the
Yeah.
story, in terms of people who are trying, but they have $1 million, so it's not like they have a whole lot, they could do, but. I mean, I've seen worse. I don't think it's a great film, but I do appreciate the heart and the charm, and there was something about it that really does capture the whole vibe of the Fantastic Four. The
Yes.
family aspects,
Yeah.
the togetherness, that part of it. But Mister, talking with my hands, Doctor Doom, you can't hear what he's saying because
Right.
he's just wearing the metal mask, and like they couldn't do any ADR. So it's just, but it's there's a great documentary called Doomed, which
Oh
is
yeah.
about the
Yeah. I've seen it.
about the Fantastic Four film.
Yeah,
Um,
when I did it, by the way, it was at CBS for like a year,
hmm.
and then they basically said this is like way too expensive. And then some famous producer came out and he said, "I think I just want to make a movie about the Torch, the Human Torch."
Hmm.
And so they split them up for a period of time. But I love the work that I did on that, and it was a lot of fun. And again, it was with Stan Lee, and he loved it, and and I got poster boards from it,
Yeah.
which is